chucking it down with rain, basically. Hey, we make the most of it, right? Well, meanwhile, a few things happening, and sadly, today may also be the last day that my YouTube channel is up and running, because as of Monday, YouTube's terms and conditions change, which basically gives YouTube the opportunity to pretty much cull any video or any channel that basically doesn't regurgitate the orthodox narrative. So this is very much a massive step. Of course, this is Google, and you know, we know that Google, it's admitted that Google has a very direct interest in bringing about political outcomes, and consequently anything that challenges those desired outcomes is at risk. And it is with great regret that I learned yesterday that Gemma O'Doherty, who has become a truly outstanding campaigner for truth and fighting corruption in Ireland, has once again had her YouTube channel shut down. Now, Gemma and her friends are outside Google's headquarters in Dublin and demanding that her channel is reinstated. So it's going to be very interesting to see what can be done there. But if you feel it appropriate, then perhaps drop Google a line and make it clear that this kind of suppression and censorship is totally unacceptable. But of course there are other platforms, and I am pleased to say that thanks to a wonderful lady who's been working hard quietly away for the last 12 months or so, that all of my material is also up on Vimeo, on DTube, and I think on Brighteon as well. So maybe that we are coming towards the end of YouTube's useful life, and that due to its determination to promote the orthodox agenda, that we have to move to other platforms. But that's okay. You know, we knew that was coming at some point, so maybe, you know, it's not too far away. So I just want to draw your attention to an article that I think is going to appear in The Guardian today. It certainly appeared on The Guardian online site last night. And the headline is, "Police call for tougher sentences to deter Extinction Rebellion." Of course, the headline should read, "Extinction Rebellion to facilitate tougher sentences for peaceful protest," because Extinction Rebellion is nothing more than a tool to enable the establishment to bring in even greater draconian legislation to shut down peaceful protest, and of course to try to demonize peaceful protest in the eyes of the wider community, and particularly Middle England, because if Middle England starts to truly step into its power, then it will change the political dynamic in a very big way. And it is Middle England coming together within their communities that has thwarted the fracking agenda in this country. And so, of course, the establishment wants to make sure this doesn't happen again. So, you know, roll out your controlled opposition, Extinction Rebellion. Anyone who says they're not controlled, their boats got police escorts. So these boats that they're using to blockade the centres of the cities, they got a police escort. And now, of course, the police are moaning, because that's all part of the circus, that, you know, they're causing massive disruption. And I think yesterday there was discussion on Bristol radio, because a gentleman was held up on the M32 thanks to Extinction Rebellion, and he couldn't get to his dying father in hospital. I mean, obviously, you know, these kinds of things are tragic. And when they do occur, it's inevitable that the media are going to maximise this as an opportunity to demonise protest. But the protests being played out by Extinction Rebellion are totally faux. They're protesting against something that is completely intangible, and that is this ungraspable climate change. Well, let's have a look at this, because, you know, Extinction Rebellion certainly is made up of some very, very well-meaning people, but unfortunately they are being manipulated. They are being manipulated by the likes of Roger Julian Hallam, Gail Bradbrook, and George Barder. And, Roger Hallam is very grateful because he's going to get a PhD on social manipulation out of this. But it also enables the establishment just to see how far their deception has penetrated into the wider consciousness. And, we can trace the climate change issue right back to 1963 and the report from Iron Mountain, which is dismissed by many as a fraudulent document, but whatever that might mean. But nonetheless, that document, which appeared in the public domain in 1967, has proven to be remarkably prescient. And Zbigniew Brzezinski, writing his book Between Two Ages, The Technotronic Era, in 1969, published in 1970, drew heavily on that document, on the report from Iron Mountain. So my conjecture is either that Brzezinski was party to that report, or having discovered it in the public domain, just built on it and turned it into his book, which got him to the attention of the Rockefellers. And then from that point forward, he was on the Rockefeller payroll and, of course, subsequently founded the Trilateral Commission on behalf of the Rockefellers, which is obviously a major think tank like the Council on Foreign Relations and the Bilderbergers in terms of pushing the globalist agenda down through the corporatist hierarchy. But then in the 1970s, the Club of Rome picked it up. This is after Brzezinski's book. And they wrote, the common enemy of humanity is man. In searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine and the like would fit the bill. All these dangers are caused by human intervention, and it is only through changed attitudes and behaviours that they can be overcome. The real enemy then is humanity itself. And this has the hallmark of Maurice Strong all over it. And Maurice Strong, of course, was the co-author of the Agenda 21 document, which his other partner in that was none other than Mikhail Gorbachev. Now, Agenda 21 has percolated right through society, and a few weeks ago, when I was visiting a dolmen on the Menai, just off the Menai Straits on Anglesey, on the plaque outside, the local authority had made their own observation about the local authority contribution to local Agenda 21. Well, Maurice Strong was a guy who made his money out of oil, the Canadian oil industry back in the 60s. But then somewhere along the line, he appears to have established a conscience, or was it just a desire for global governance? Because he was absolutely of the opinion that the UN needed to become the world government. And everything that he tried to do was based on fulfilling that ambition. And so he said that the Earth Summit isn't the only hope for the planet, that the industrialized civilizations collapse. Isn't it our responsibility to bring that about? So, here we have another extremely wealthy, green communist. And, it's one law for one and one law for everybody else. So straight out of Animal Farm, some people, animals, are more equal than others. And, the observation is that anthropogenic climate change is and has always been a radical campaign to facilitate the acceptance of reducing global population. And of course, this was embedded in the Georgia Guidestones, which mysteriously appeared in 1982, where the top goal was maintain humanity at 500 million in perpetual balance with nature, which means that the globalists, those who believe themselves to be the rightful rulers of a planetary fiefdom, had calculated that they needed just 500 million people to service them, to support them, and the rest were superfluous to requirements. So this was brought about initially again by the Club of Rome's publication in 1972, which follows on from the report from Iron Mountain, from Brzezinski's book. And this was the limits of growth, which became the Green Bible. And it sort of basically said that, it was predicting an extremely dire future unless people acted now. And basically did everything they possibly could to exit this mortal coil, because obviously they were a strain on the resources. So, the corporatocracy, as I said yesterday, is using this as an opportunity to blame humanity for the effects that they know are literally about to manifest as a direct result of the 400-year solar minimum cycle. So, Extinction Rebellion has been tasked with effectively accelerating the agenda to get people to buy in to their own destruction, to the end of industrialized civilizations. Whilst the corporatocracy knows that there are alternatives, but isn't prepared to sacrifice their supremacy. So, where are Extinction Rebellion when it comes to talking about things like the use of hemp and the fact that the production of hemp has basically been suppressed since the 1940s? In fact, it was 1942, shortly after America entered the Second World War, that Henry Ford built a vehicle that was 70% cellulose, which is effectively the waste product of crops, of wheat, of barley, and of course hemp. And the vehicle was fueled thanks to diesel, Rudolf Diesel, and who designed the diesel engine to run on effectively vegetable oils. And so that was the 1940s. And in the 1970s, we had lean burn technology, which enabled vehicles, which back in the 1970s had an average of about 30 miles to gallon efficiency. And this enabled up to 70 miles a gallon using lean burn technology. But again, that was suppressed, and the fuel companies actually bought the AA and RAC, because everybody was a member of one of those organizations back then, to promote the idea that the use of lean burn technology, or adapting your vehicle to use lean burn technology, would damage the engine and cause massive costs in remedial repairs. A total crock. But what it meant was people were reluctant to install these devices in their vehicles. Then, of course, we had the Stanley Myers situation, where Stanley Myers developed the hydrogen fuel cell and drove his vehicle from LA to Chicago on, I think it was about 400 litres of water. And he was sequestered by the US military. And when he rocked up to start his period of sequestration, then he picked up a glass of champagne, and the toast was 2 water-powered fighting vehicles. And he collapsed and died. And, of course, that technology is totally suppressed, and there is no discussion on the use, really, of hydrogen fuel cells. The push is towards electric vehicles, without any regard for the damage that the production of electric vehicles and the usage of electric vehicles actually causes the environment, not least the rape and the pillage of rare earth materials. And as I said, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, much of those rare earth materials are coming out of China. And of course, China, really is becoming very dominant, not just on the in industrialization, but also, of course, in terms of gaining access or even control over those areas of the world that will become the new food growing regions once the solar minimum really kicks in. So, Maurice Strong. Who was Maurice Strong? Well, this Canadian industrialist, this former oil baron with a conscience, having got the traction, having managed to finagle his way to pull off the Earth Summit in Rio in 1992, where he had 108 world leaders and 20,000 green activists, because Strong knew that basically it was the gullible Greens who he could mislead and misdirect to bring about his vision of global governance with a greatly reduced population. So Strong was pioneering Agenda 21. And very few people have actually read this document. It is freely available. You can download it. Of course, it's been updated to become 2030, Agenda 2030, because they're running a bit behind schedule for some reason. But you know, Strong's conscience didn't go to the length of him embracing total honesty. And in 2005, it was alleged that he had taken over $1 million from the UN's Oil for Food program, which was the fund that was set up to enable Iraq to actually buy medicines during the term of sanctions, global sanctions. So he disappeared and reappeared in an apartment in Beijing, where he hung out until just a few days before his death in December of 2015. So at the end of his life, he was pretty much persona non gratis. Certainly wasn't able to return to the US or Canada for fear of arrest, which is why he hung out in Beijing. But nonetheless, what people don't realize who are participating in this faux extinction, rebellion, disruption campaign is that they are effectively pushing the eugenicist agenda of population reduction. Now, back in 2009, in November 2009, I delivered a presentation at AB3 called The Green Agenda and Population Reduction. And I'm going to put a link to that, that video, which is on my YouTube channel. I'm going to put a link to it under this morning's broadcast. And I encourage people to watch it. It's 10 years ago. And basically, everything that I was presenting 10 years ago is now coming into play as the globalists push their eugenicist agenda, which they believe is going to be aided by the effects of the solar minimum. And instead of acknowledging that they have been, the global politicians have been remiss in preparing for this event, they're simply just going to use the opportunity to blame it on humanity and encourage you to pop off this mortal coil sooner rather than later. And, you know, where this is heading is pretty scary, really, because, you know, with an increasing amount of our youth being diagnosed as autistic, and in some forecasts it's been estimated that in the US by 2030 70% of youth will be on the autism spectrum. And of course, unfortunately, one of the effects of autism is to disable the capability and capacity for full spectrum analysis of a situation. So these autistic youth can literally be wound up and pointed in a particular direction. In fact, we're seeing that right now with certain spokespeople for this agenda. And, you know, there is little regard for the wider implications because they just don't have the capacity for considering those implications. And what I fear is that what will be promoted by these socio-psychopathic global corporatists is effectively a war between the generations, with the youth being told that basically anybody over the age of, let's say, 50, who is no longer able to contribute to the corporatocracy, either because of their health or because there's basically no work, because much of the employment has been taken up by artificial intelligence and robotics. So on the basis that there's no point, and they are simply taking up much needed oxygen, then euthanasia. So sadly, this is no longer the realm of science fiction. It's the implementation of a vision of the likes of socio-psychopaths like Maurice Strong. So if over the coming few weeks, when you're going on holiday, instead of taking some random novel, why not take a look at Maurice Strong's work, Agenda 21, or read the report from Iron Mountain. Like I said, many try to dismiss it as a forgery, whatever that might mean, but it's remarkably prescient. And certainly download the PDF of Zbigniew Brzezinski's Between Two Ages, the Technotronic Era, and then also read The Limits to Growth. And you start to put the pieces of the jigsaw together for yourself. Now, for those of us that still enjoy the capability and capacity of independent thought, it's important that we do the research and that we engage in discussion. But sadly, what you find is increasingly those who say, well, because I disagree with you on one thing, you must be a government shill. You must be out there to control the agenda. Well, the only thing that I'm trying to do is to stimulate people's own curiosity, for them to come to their own realization of what's unfolding here, and to come to their own determination of what they want to do to participate in either bringing about that goal, if that's their bent, or resisting it, and coming up with an alternative that has the best interests of humanity at heart, as opposed to the best interests of those who think they are the rightful rulers of a planetary fiefdom. You have a great weekend, and I will be back with you at